This is the U-Show podcast.
Trocheck puts it in front. He's got McDonald. He scores!
Unbelievable.
Jacob McDonald. His first NHL game. His first NHL goal.
First NHL shot.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into the U-Show podcast. I'm Chris Trept. I'm along with Ben Gisselson of the Des Moines Buccaneers. And another special treat for you guys today. Jacob McDonald is our guest. He is a defenseman / forward for the Colorado Eagles and Colorado Avalanche organization. An incredible story this guy has. He started his pro career in a straight ECHL deal, making 500 or so bucks a week for the Elmira Jackals, a team that isn't even around anymore, in Elmira, New York, in one of the older barns in the league, and then just made the climb up and made his NHL debut with the Florida Panthers. What you have to go through to be an ECHL contracted guy and work your way up to playing in the NHL is a tough task. It really is, because there's a lot of guys that are NHL contracted guys or AHL contracted guys that just get sent down to the coast and then work their way up. But to be actually on contract in the ECHL, and I saw him play in Elmira and with the Toledo Walleye the next year, and I was thinking there's no way this guy's an ECHL player, and he proved me right when he made the NHL a few seasons later. But he's a USHL guy. He's a late bloomer, but he's really coming to his own, and now he has a great future with the Colorado Eagles and Colorado Avalanche.
Chris, the deck is stacked against you if you are an ECHL contracted skater without an NHL deal or any NHL affiliation. And that's exactly where Jacob McDonald was coming out of college. And you and I talked, Chris, off air about you'll see ECHL goalies make the rise. That's not unprecedented. And not that it's unprecedented to see players make the rise, but it's very rare. You don't see it very often because, like you mentioned, if you don't have that NHL logo by your name somewhere, you have to prove time and time again that you can play at the next level. Where if you have that logo next to you, you have to prove that you can't. And it's a lot easier to prove that you can't than you can. So I look at McDonald as a story of perseverance, as a guy who probably just showed up to the arena every day and said, what can I do to be better today? And he's still doing that. He's gotten his crack at the NHL, but you and I both are in agreement that we think he's going to get a more sustained crack here in the near future. And it was a terrific interview. He had a really good time with us. We had an even better time with him. So I'm looking forward to hitting play on this one and letting the fans have a bite out of this.
For sure. And it is frustrating because I spent 4 seasons in Atlanta in the ECHL, and to see some of these guys that don't belong there, that belong at the higher levels, but they started on ECHL contracts, and what they have to go through against guys who they're better than, that are on NHL deals, or AHL guys who, were just drafted by the team, and then they bury them in the ECHL, and those guys get a chance to get called up because they're already paying them. I mean, it's frustrating to see good people and that deserve a shot, and they'll just never get it. But he battled through all of that for what he did. I mean, it's very admirable. So hats off to him, and let's hear it from the man himself. Colorado Eagles defenseman Jacob McDonald. Joining us now on the U-Show podcast is a defenseman in the Colorado Avalanche organization, mostly with the Colorado Eagles this past season, Jacob McDonald. Jacob, how are we doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, Chris. Thank you for having me on here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And so obviously we asked the same question to everybody. You're going to get the same one. It's a crazy time right now. We know you stepped on the ice for the first time yesterday, but
Yep.
What's it been like during this weird off season, whatever you want to call it? What have you been up to? Hockey and, trying to stay in shape. But besides that too, what have been your guilty pleasures?
Fortunately, I've been able to golf a lot. So that's kind of been keeping me busy. And then at the start of this too, my wife and I actually adopted a dog like 3 days into quarantine. So he's a year old now, and it's been an absolute blast. And I've always wanted a dog for myself. My family had him growing up, but having a dog with my wife and having him here has just been incredible. So it's been a lot of fun with him, being able to get on the golf course as well. Those are the two things that they've passed a lot of time, to say the least. So
You can't think of a better time to adopt a dog when you have more time in the world to train it, get to know it, and that was probably pretty fun.
it was exactly, that was kind of the, the main factor behind the decision to get it in the first place is, we don't know how long this is going to go. Obviously it's been, almost 3 months now, but, we're going to have at least a few weeks off here. This is a perfect time for us to get a dog. We've always talked about getting one. So it just kind of worked out well that way.
So we're going to go back to the start. Born and raised in Portland, Oregon. That's when you decided you fell in love with hockey, and then eventually you made the move to Michigan. And you said that was a hockey-based decision. So growing up in Portland, when did you realize, like, man, I can maybe make this into a career? And then moving to Michigan, what was that process like? Because it was probably pretty crazy for a teenager or a preteen.
Yeah, no, I always planned on it becoming a career, whether or not I don't know if there's a realization period of like, oh, I can actually do this. I would say that came a lot later, but I always wanted that for myself. So I guess growing up in Portland, I got invited to go play on select teams up in Canada and stuff during the springtime. So, that was when my dad and I both realized like I can play with the best players because, they're the Canadians, right? That's like a kid growing up, you want to be as good as the Canadians, and they've kind of had that, reputation, I guess you could say. So, I was playing in Canada as a kid, and then, we decided, hey, Michigan's a great spot. It's hockey town, right? So, that was kind of, I would say it was a hockey-based decision, but it was, the thing that really propelled my career to be able to advance the way that, I wanted it to. So.
Right. So you go and you join the CompuWare organization, which is obviously one of the many great organizations in the Detroit area.
Mm-hmm.
Is that where you first got your first glimpse at the USHL? Obviously, Portland up there is a WHL territory, or even, the Alberta leagues, British Columbia leagues. But in terms of junior hockey, moving to the Midwest, is that when you first realized the USHL and college hockey were an option?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got into hockey originally by going to a Winterhawks game. And so that was kind of the first taste of it. And I went to the rink, and that was all I ever wanted to do. So I had no idea I knew college hockey was a thing. I didn't know how you get there at all. So, when you move to Michigan, you have options, and you have the OHL and you have the USHL are the two main ones. So my family has always stressed that college education is really important. So for me, it was kind of an easy decision. I was drafted by Guelph in the OHL. And then after that, I went to their camp for a day or two. You're only allowed to go there if you want to keep your college eligibility for like a day. So I went there for a day. It was great, but it wasn't like, wow, this is what I want to do. So I knew that the college education was, the right way for me to go. So then I went into a training camp with Fargo, going into my 16 year, didn't make the team. And then around Christmas time, I ended up making it to Waterloo. So it was a ton of fun there. I had a blast, but moving to Michigan was definitely the introduction to the USHL and to college hockey pretty much as well.
So you went Portland, Oregon to Detroit, Michigan to Waterloo, Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
I bring this up often because I'm someone who grew up in the Minnesota area, came down to Des Moines, Iowa for my first real job in my profession. And what I knew of Iowa was cornfields. And what I've learned about Iowa is there's a lot more than that here. In Des Moines is a great city. Waterloo, where I've been to many times, is a wonderful city. What were your expectations of the state of Iowa and the city of Waterloo once you had decided as a family that Jacob McDonald was going to play his junior hockey there?
So my expectation was cornfields. That's a pretty good description.
It's universal, yeah.
That's kind of what you think of. That's the first thing that pops into your head, right? But I had no idea what I was getting myself into. What actually ended up happening is they had a game, I want to say the 27th of December, and I had went and tried out like early December. They said, yeah, we want to bring you up in a couple weeks, so we come back after Christmas break. What ended up happening is I drove to Waterloo by myself from Michigan when I was 16 on Christmas morning. So I had Christmas the day before with my family and drove on the 25th to Waterloo and stayed at my billets from then on out. And, that whole process was, you become an adult pretty quickly, I would say, but it's an absolute blast, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. So I had a great time doing that, and I'm obviously super thankful for Waterloo and that organization and PK bringing me in. So
You bring up PK, and he was obviously on our list of people to get to, because when you talk about the Waterloo Black Hawks, the single most name that is synonymous with that organization is PK O'Hanley. Depending on who you talk to, everyone would call him legendary. Some might call him infamous if they've coached or played against him. But he is a larger-than-life character in this league, the all-time winningest coach in the history of the league.
Yeah.
Talk about him. When you think of PK O'Hanley, what are the first 2 or 3 stories, or maybe the first story that comes to mind when you think of PK?
There's a lot. There's a lot of bag skates. There's a lot of just, him yelling or getting on the players, but it all comes from a place of love. He loves the game. He loves his players, and he wants us all to get better and make it to the next level. And obviously he has a track record unlike anybody else, and he advances the players to the next level, and he was able to do that with me, and I would definitely put him in the legend status for sure. So
when you think about your time in Waterloo, where do you think are the biggest areas that PK had an impact on you? Because I've spoken with other players that I know that have played for him, a couple that actually you played with, Andrew Prochnow, Tyson Fulton, that have both talked about his ability to challenge players, but to challenge them in a very hard way, a very difficult way, but it's fair. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. When I said that you become an adult very fast, part of it is, leaving your family and going to stay in a foreign place that you've never been before. Everything's new to you. But along with that comes a challenge of, PK and the rest of the staff, trying to get you to become a better player. And he does that in a very direct way, which I respond very well to. A lot of people do or don't. A lot of people don't, but he's very hard on guys, which is what a lot of people and a lot of kids, 16 to 19, they need that. So he's obviously a legend for a reason, and he might be hard on you, but it's, like I said, it comes from a good spot, and his track record speaks for itself, right? So
that building, Young Arena, and Des Moines fans that tune into this podcast I might get some hate mail or some hate DMs about this, but I think it is on par with our building, Buccaneer Arena, as my favorite building to go to in the league. The fans there are just tremendous. The ice surface is large, which means with that Olympic sheet, the game is always fast there. And it's just a fabulous place it's the quintessential junior hockey building to me. Talk about that building and talk about those fans and what it was like for you to be there for that season and a half that you had with the Blackhawks and play in front of such a tremendous fan base.
The first word that comes to mind is deafening when you switch from, you're playing at a youth rink to that fan base with, I think it's around 4,000 people, and every one of them has at least one cowbell, if not 2 or 3 or 4. And it's insane is what it is. And it's an absolute blast. And that was kind of, I would say for me, one of the coolest experiences in my life to that point was being able to go and play my first game at Young Arena with the fans being the way that they are. It's just absolutely crazy. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced up to that point. So the only word I can think of is fun. It was an absolute awesome time from start to finish for the year and a half that I had there. It was incredible. So, hands down, my favorite place to play in the USHL, obviously being my home rink, but in my opinion, second to none. So
junior hockey players often bring up movie theaters or bowling alleys, a lot of restaurants where they'll go to hang out at when you're away from hockey, away from working out. What were the places in Waterloo that when you were there, the Blackhawks were hanging out at aside from billet houses? Because I know that's a lot of time spent as well at specific billet houses.
Yeah, no, the billet houses was obviously the most time. My roommate from there, I still talk to almost every day. So I would say other than the billet houses, we bowled a lot. I'm not a huge movie guy personally, but I know some guys do spend a lot of time there. But for me and and my roommate and a couple of other of us, we bowled regularly, and that was the most fun because my dad actually bowled a little bit professionally in some tournaments and stuff. So, for me, that was something cool to do to kind of connect with him when he came into town too. So I had a blast bowling. That was my biggest go-to. I wasn't that big into golf yet at the time, but when it did get warmer towards the spring months, I would try to golf a little bit as well. But for the most part, it was bowling during the winter months.
When you were at your bowling peak, what was your average score, do you think? And did you ever take on your father and take down the Titan of bowling as he seems to be?
He doesn't, he's getting old. I feel bad saying it, but no, I'll beat him probably 50% of the time now. Cause he doesn't bowl anymore at all. So, it's probably 50-50 for us. But when I was at my peak, I was probably bowling between 160 and 170, 165, 175 regularly. And then, I think I hit my best in Waterloo. Actually, I hit 225 was my best game, but
no kidding.
Yeah. So
Little
wasn't quite as good as he was. He has a 300 under his belt. So I will, I'll get there someday.
Are you better golfer or bowler?
Bowler. I like it a lot. I'm probably better at it. I do enjoy golf though. I'm a bogey golfer though. So I'm working on it, but not very
I
well.
wish I could be a bogey golfer, Jacob. So I'm going to keep aiming for that.
No, it's tough though. Like a lot of hockey guys, right? They a lot of them golf a lot. So
yeah,
I go out. Like I said, I've been fortunate enough to golf up in Fort Collins, where the Eagles are at, pretty regularly since the quarantine has started. So I go out with like 3 or 4 of the guys that stayed around town, and I just get waxed every time. But it's fun. So I'm just having a good time, and that's what matters. So
it's the worst. They're putting, and you're trying to find your ball.
Yeah, I'm stuck on the side, like trying to pull my ball out of a river, and they're like 2 putting from 55 feet, and I'm just like, okay,
well, all right.
You guys on the next hole.
Well, speaking of teammates, in terms of Waterloo, if you really look at that second season of yours, your full season, you guys didn't do great. You didn't do bad. Snuck into the playoffs, just under 500. Yep. But if you look at that roster, when I was studying up and I saw it, I recognized so many names of guys that went on to play pro hockey. I mean, Alex Guptill had an amazing career at Michigan and then went on to have a great pro career that's still going on. Hinostroza was 10th on the team in scoring. Now he's in the NHL. Both your goaltenders were great. CJ Mott is an American League guy. So, I mean, why do you think that you guys – I hate to use the word struggled because it was still a good year – but you guys weren't at the top of the standings in the USHL, but you seem to have more professional hockey players than most teams that I've seen.
Yeah, no, I've kind of thought about that from time to time as well. Vinny obviously probably being the most successful from that team. Ian McCoshen as well, who I would say I played with him last year in Springfield, and the fact that guy's not in the NHL is just shocking to me. But, there's a lot of guys on that team that played a lot of years pro, and guys peak at different times. That was certainly not my peak. Like I've gotten significantly better relative since then. So it's just guys peak at different times, and when you see guys that come in and they might have been 10th in the league or 10th on the team in scoring, like Vinny, for example, but he's in the NHL now. It's just guys peak at different times. He was also a little bit younger at the time too, and McCoshen was an underage kid. So it's just for me, it's like guys peak at different times, and we were relatively young as well. So it's just kind of a mix of that. You can never really I guess predict how a team is going to be based on how the players are, right?
It's a good thing that you didn't peak when you were in the USHL. That's not the goal of anybody when they go to the USHL, or at least it shouldn't be. It's a developmental league at its core, and you, like a lot of your teammates you just mentioned, continued to grow. But where do you feel you brought up the maturity aspect of you turning into a man while you were there, but aside from that, what are some of the other areas that you felt you grew the most when you were in Waterloo?
I think a big part of that was work ethic. As a kid playing youth hockey, working out, it's a little bit of a thing now. It shouldn't be at all, but it in my opinion, I think that, we started working out a little bit, just working on form more than like lifting heavy weights, so kind of the work habits off the ice that translate to on the ice. I think that was a big part of it. And, just kind of the structure of how the organization was run and how guys conduct themselves, even the older guys who aren't in high school anymore, just how everybody conducts themselves. That's kind of like the biggest like wake up call. Like, you got to, kind of grow up, conduct yourself accordingly. You can't be a kid anymore. So that's kind of, I would just say, the most, like, I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for. It's the most obvious, like, telltale sign, like, you need to grow up. Like, this is how you conduct yourself. You're not a kid anymore.
For the Black Hawk fans that will listen to this, and there will be many, what does Jacob McDonald have to say to them at this time? I'm sure it's stay safe, but I'm sure there's more to that message as well.
It's stay safe, but thank you. You guys were my introduction to, the next level of hockey. And I'm super thankful for everybody who ever, came there and had a cowbell or two or three or four. Those people were awesome, and they made the experience in Waterloo incredible. So I'm just super thankful for anyone who ever came out and rang a cowbell. So I appreciate it.
Up next, the Cornell Big Red, an opportunity to play Division I college hockey, but also to get a fabulous education at an Ivy League school. Mm-hmm. Was Ivy League always in your sights, or was it just you felt like this was the perfect combination of both hockey and academics? Talk to us about that process and why the Big Red became the school for Jacob McDonald.
So during the process, you have hopefully a few different colleges coming to talk to you, right? So for me, I had three. It was Ferris State, Yale, and Cornell. And for me, Cornell was the best combination of hockey and athletics. Yale is the peak of athletics. Ferris State has a lot of guys go pro. And Cornell was kind of in that mix of both for me. So they had a lot of, pro players, but at the same time, you have the Ivy League education as well. So for me, that was kind of the best choice. Like you said, the combination of hockey and athletics. But the other deciding factor is I went to a game at Cornell, and I saw a Saturday night game against Colgate. They came back, scored with a minute left, and Greg Miller had a slap shot from the blue line, won the game in overtime, and that was like the loudest thing I'd ever heard. No offense to fans at Young Arena, but I was like, wow, that was incredible. So I flew home Sunday and committed Monday morning. Like, it was a no-brainer. So it was a very similar atmosphere with the low roof, the crazy fans. The student section was bananas. So that was a no-brainer for me.
Looking at Waterloo, looking at your pro career, you've been a guy that's contributed from the back end successfully. Cornell, not quite the same story. Looking at the numbers there, does not by any means mean that it was a failure or a lack of success for you while you were there. But what do you think Cornell taught you about the game of hockey from a defensive standpoint that helped lead you to the success you've had in your pro career?
I think that, Cornell is widely known as a highly defensive system, and, they hold true by that. So Cornell wins games 1-0. I think that my senior year, we might have scored 60 goals the whole year. Like, the entire season, we scored 60 goals. So, and we had a winning record, if I remember correctly, where we were right around 500. But the point being, you don't score a lot there. So the points in terms of my production, you don't see any comparison because you play 68 games. I believe it's 68, or it might have been 64 at the time in the USHL. And then in pro, you play 72 in the Coast, 76 in the American League, and 82 in the NHL. You have more games than even goals are scored in college. So the points aren't even – it's not even really a comparison in my opinion. But in terms of what they taught me, I think defensively, like I said, they're a defensive system, and they taught me a lot about how to, position myself and, the importance of getting a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, a little bit faster, because when you're 18, I went as a true freshman, you're competing against 23, 24, 25-year-olds. So for me, you got to get bigger, get stronger. And, that work ethic, to get there, was one of the biggest things that I took away from Cornell.
So your time is done at Cornell. Now you move to pro hockey.
Mm-hmm.
For most guys coming out of college, it's a whirlwind. You don't know what level you're going to be interested or have interest in you. You end up signing in nearby Elmira with the Elmira Jackals in the ECHL. And that's where you started your career. You started in the ECHL, and it was an absolute battle. And not many times do you see guys who come out of college and sign in the ECHL as opposed to signing NHL contracts, AHL contracts, getting sent to the ECHL, climb, and eventually make the NHL like you did. Like ECHL doesn't stand for anything, but I've heard many guys call it easy come, hard to leave, right? But that wasn't the case for you. You went to Toledo, which is obviously the top notch in the league.
Yeah.
You battled in the American League, and you didn't last there long. You went to Florida after your first experience in the American League shortly thereafter. So how do you think you were able to do that when so many guys have tried and failed?
I would say part of that has to do with the takeaway from Cornell was the work ethic part of it, right? I think that there's a lot of times you see somebody who comes out of college, they sign an entry-level deal, they make all this money for, 3 years, whatever it might be, and then they don't get re-signed, and they're like, oh no, what am I going to do? And then they have to sign a coast deal, and they're ending up making $500 a week. It's a totally different, world, and you get down on yourself for that, right? That's very easy to do, and nobody's at fault for that. It's just a very difficult transition. But for me, I made $480 a week for my first 3 weeks there after I signed at the end of my senior year, and I was like, this is awesome, I'm rich, like I can do it. So I can play pro hockey. Like, now I need to get better. So I spent that first full year in the coast, and all the credit in the world to Jamie Russell. He gave me every opportunity. He's the head coach there in Elmira, and he gave me every opportunity, and I flourished. I did very well, and I'm very fortunate to have had Jamie as a coach. And so for me, that obviously led to the Toledo thing, but, you keep getting better. And I got a call up at the end of that season, that first year in Elmira, to Springfield, where I only played the one game at the very end of the season. But it's like, wow, I did pretty well. I can handle myself here. So next year, I'm going to try to get to that level. And I worked and I worked and I worked. And you take that work ethic from Cornell and you apply it and you get better and better and better. And that's just kind of the mentality that I've had. And even now to this day, like I just try to apply that and, continue to become the best hockey player I can be. So that's kind of been my mentality since the start. And, hopefully it just continues on that path. That's all.
Having worked in the ECHL the last few years, I hear a lot of guys say that they just are a pro player. They're a pro style player. I've seen guys like Tanner Pond who were USHL guys and didn't do well in college and then went to the coast and were dominant, and then all of a sudden they're in the American League, no problem. Would you consider yourself a pro style player? Because I remember I was with Atlanta in the coast, and I remember seeing you and going, this guy does not belong at this level. I mean, you were just dominating the game out there. But would you consider yourself, you're just a pro style player?
To an extent, yeah, for sure. I would consider my game a two-way defenseman who plays both ends of the puck, but offensively, I would say that I've done very well, and I worked very hard at that. So that's kind of, at the pro level, you don't have guys with face masks sliding 3 at a time in front of you to block shots like you do in college, and that's another part of why you don't see the point transitions from college to pro a lot of the time. That, especially for defensemen that, are offensively gifted, you don't see, big points in college for a reason. You have 5 guys trying to block the puck in front of you, in front of the goalie. And, it doesn't happen for a lot of guys. So, but, Tanner Pond is a good example, somebody you can come in and, I think that their style of play, I've played against him a few times, and he does have a good pro style of play. So it's just like, there's a lot of guys like that, and I would consider myself in that group as well. But it's just, trying to adapt your game to the level that you're at. So I think I've been fortunate to be able to do that relatively well. So
we talked about adapting, and that's something you did this year. Colorado, the Avalanche, were absolutely riddled with injuries. You're a defenseman. All of a sudden, you're asked to play forward. You did it, and you had a lot of success. When was the last time you played forward before this season, and how was it going from defense to forward in the American Hockey League? You're not going from defense to forward in summer pickup hockey.
Yeah, the last time I did play forward was when I tried out for CompuWare when I was 12. And I played the first little bit, maybe the first month or so at CompuWare as a forward. Same thing happened. A couple D got hurt. We only had 4 D, so I went back. I was the 5th D. And my first game at defense with CompuWare, I had 5 goals. I took the puck from behind the net, just went end-to-end and scored. I was like, this is awesome. I get to build up speed. I get to go score. This is great. So I stuck with defense. And so that was the last time I played forward. When I switched this year, knowing that was kind of my roots in hockey, it took a few games, at least 3 or 4 or 5 games to kind of get used to that, get the puck from the defenseman on the half wall and try to chip it past the D-man that's coming down the wall to kill you. That's normally my job, and I love that part of my job. But being on the other end of that, it's a lot different. So for me, it was just kind of getting used to the timing more so and the positioning. The defensive zone is a little bit easier, but for me, having the puck in the offensive zone as a forward, I'm like, where do I go right now? Like, what do I do? Just the very first game I played, I got stopped in the corner, and I wasn't moving my feet. And I get back to the bench, and my coach is yelling at me, like, move your feet. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know where to go. But after a couple, 3 games, like, that lesson kicked in pretty quick because you're going to get pummeled if you just stand not moving. So the first 3 or 4 games, I was kind of getting the feel for it. But after that, it kind of comes natural as a hockey player, I think, a little bit to, revert back to what I had done, growing up. So after the first, I would say at least 3 or 4 or 5 games, it got a lot easier for sure.
Jacob, everybody wants to have that gravy train ride to the NHL where they're a first-round pick and they're getting the signing bonus. They're joining the team in the NHL right out of the gates after college or junior or whatever it is. You're a testament to the fact that that's a pretty rare scenario. And you are a testament in the fact that you've taken what you've been given and you've made the most out of it seems, at every level. What kind of advice would you give to the next generation of players that are coming to the USHL that want to be those top-round draft picks but likely aren't going to be, but can still achieve their goals despite of that?
The first thing is you just don't get down on yourself. You see the guys that are the first-round picks, they're obviously incredibly talented, and you see guys that are first-round picks that also don't make too much of themselves, and the where you're at age 18 isn't going to be where you're at age 19 even, or 21 or 25 or 28. Like, it doesn't matter all that much. And in the long run, as long as you work hard, there's no limit to how good you can be, and everybody's trajectory is different. So guys peak in the USHL, and it happens, and they get drafted high, and then, like I said, that's their peak, so they're on their way back down. It's just that happens. But as long as you work hard, I would say there's really no limit to where you can go at all.
How crazy of a ride was it just to think about? Do you ever sit back and look that I was once playing in Elmira, New York, in a very tiny building, and then all of a sudden you're playing in the NHL and you're looking around going, I started in Elmira, New York, and now I'm playing for the Panthers. Like, how did you have that moment? Did you ever reflect back on that and realize, like, what an accomplishment that was?
There was, I would say, 2 moments where I reflected on. I was like, wow. The first one being the national anthem before the game in Tampa Bay, the first game that I played. And I was like looking up, and the national anthem finished, and, they have the lightning actually going off inside the building. And I was like, where am I right now? This is crazy. But the second one kind of happened later on, and it's like that first game was awesome. Even the second game was great. Obviously, that's been my only experience so far. But you have that realization, like, you can play there, you can score there, you can get back to that level if you keep working hard. So I would say that second moment kind of came when you're like, yeah, I played in Elmira. I made $480 a week. Like, awesome. But now I can get to the next level. Now I'm here. Now I know I can get to the next level. So that's kind of like where I would say that second moment happens, is like every once in a while, I'm on the ice or I'm working out or something, like thinking about playing in the NHL. And that's where that moment always happens for me. Like, I played in the Coast. I know I can do this.
Well, all right. We really appreciate your time. We thank you a ton for this. It was great to talk to you. And, you know, sometimes we talk to the first round guys or guys that are consistent in the NHL, but they might not have had a great story as yours, of perseverance, of hard work to get to where you are, battling through all the stuff you've had to go through. So we really appreciate your time and best of luck. We hope to see you in the NHL really soon.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Ben. I really appreciate you guys having me on. Thank you.
Another big thanks to Jacob McDonald for joining us. And like we said, we told you how good of an interview it was. He's a charismatic guy, and he's a very humble guy. You have to be to go through all he went through. His stories about Elmira are just hilarious. And I've heard some of those stories. I've heard worse ones. I've learned some new ones about it. Their last couple of years, the Elmira Jackals were you could write a book about them. It was crazy. So for him to be a part of that and then, you know, make the rise to the NHL, you heard him say it. Like, he went from riding whatever that bus they had was to playing in front of 20,000 people in Tampa. That's just remarkable.
And Jacob's story, as he'll tell you, is by no means done yet. He has achieved all he has achieved, and what that is nothing short of just spectacular. But now that he's gotten to where he's gotten to, he's clearly the type of person and player where he's not looking back and patting himself on the back saying, boy, you know, I'm here. I'm an AHL All-Star. I was an ECHL guy for a little bit, and boy, you know, I've made it. This guy has his sights set on greater things than what he's already done, which is great, what he's already done. So I'm looking forward to seeing the progression of his game and how much more comfortable he's gotten at the AHL level over the past several seasons, and his assault on the NHL and being a guy that's going to be counted upon to play at the highest of levels in some big situations here sooner than later. And I would expect to see no different from Jacob McDonald soon.
All right. Well, Ben, thanks again for everything. And Brent, as always, behind the scenes, thanks for all the hard work you do setting all this stuff up. We pretty much just talk to the guys, and Brent gets all the dirty work done beforehand. And also, always, another big thank you to Jacob McDonald. I'm Chris Trecht, and this was the U Show Podcast.
This is the U Show Podcast.